Now, joining us to discuss the day in politics is Liberal MP from Victoria, Tim Wilson. Tim, thanks for joining us. When it comes to the government's deeming rates decision, we've heard some criticism coming from Labor today, saying that it's too little too late. Do you agree?
Well, it's just a complete load of rubbish from Labor. I mean, what we've done is adjusted in light of the fact there's been interest rate cuts and it's been proportionate, responsible action by the government, at least because everything that we do in this space has a budgetary impact, and we are making sure that when these decisions are made, that they're considered, they're costed, and they also won't jeopardise important things for the economic health and security of the nation, like a budget surplus, which Labor dismisses as not important or not central to their economic approach.
But do you accept that some in this space, some part pensioners, and you've been looking at this area very closely over the last year or so, through the franked dividends and so on, but there'll be some who won't be happy with this decision, and certainly in the upper deeming rate reduction, they don't feel it's gone far enough, and they will continue to be worse off because they go for those cautious investments.
Well, most retirees, part pensioners and those without a pension look at a mixture of investments to bear the risk associated with seeking to be as financially independent as they can be in their retirement. And so the pension or part pension is only going to fit into one part of that. But as a government, we have a choice. We can just open the floodgates and let money flood out, or we can be prudent, responsible and make sure that we put the health of the whole of the nation at the fore, and that's the focus we've taken. We've adjusted the deeming rate to make sure that retirees and those on part pensions can get a boost in light of the fact that there's been interest rate cuts. But we're also not going to jeopardise, we're not going to put at risk the surplus that we have worked so hard to get restored after years of Labor promises and not delivering. We're delivering because we're going to deliver secure finances for the nation.
There have been calls from some to have an independent advisory group set the deeming rate. Why isn't the government backing that?
For the reasons I just outlined. I don't support an independent body that sets policy parameters outside of government, which only thinks about one side of the ledger which is how much money goes out. We have to think about how much money goes out and how much money comes in, and making sure we have a balanced budget. Now, if you're Labor, for instance, and you have no concern with things like budget surpluses, Ed Hughes, you called it a vanity project only the other day to have a budget surplus. We're focusing what's prudent and responsible, and I think that's what Australians look to their government to do. They don't want us to be irresponsible. They want us to take prudent, responsible decisions in the best interests of Australians.
Was it prudent to have the RBA governor in a picture opportunity, that statement last week? Do you think that's appropriate, or should the Treasurer and others be more careful in terms of roping in someone who needs to be seen at all times as being fiercely independent?
Well, the point of being fiercely independent is actually that you're independent and that you can be independent and still talk to the government. That's the whole point. It's not independent and not associated with the government, or not proximate to the government, or not factoring into their consideration. The point of Philip Lowe is to be there to do his job, to inform the government of his course of action. Of course, that's what he was doing in meeting with the Treasurer. Talking about the health of the economy as he sees it. Now, he should also be free to sit down and disagree publicly with the government. That's the point of independence, not to be somehow physically distant. It's to be honest, straightforward and make the right decisions.
The point of the picture opportunity was to show that they're on the same page. That's something that Labor's saying is bizarre at best, but still inappropriate.
Well, I guess it would be bizarre for the Labor Party to see the Treasurer of the nation and the head of the RBA both with the clear objective, which is to improve the state and the health of the Australian economy. I mean, Labor showed complete disregard about that in the last election. I think everybody's focused on the core objective. The RBA has an objective around inflation rates, and that's the basis in which they make decisions around interest rates. The Treasurer has a responsibility for making sure that we're prudent, responsible, and that we're delivering for all Australians. They all fit as part of a comprehensive framework to make sure that we get it right. And so there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would hope that everybody's working together while doing what they think is appropriate in their different roles.
There are renewed calls for an increase to Newstart. It hasn't been increased in real terms for over 2 decades. It's half the pension, and the point that was made this morning by the Council of Ageing is that if you're nearing retirement age and you don't have a job, you're basically on half the pension just leading into that. Is that sustainable?
Well, it is if you look at it narrowly, as some people want to look at it. The reality is nearly 99% of people who get Newstart get some other form of pension or support mechanism, so I should say more correctly, other welfare benefit. And that's why, if you look in isolation, you're actually only having half the story. The government looks at welfare benefits all the time, and of course just demonstrated with deeming rates, looking about what's sustainable for the whole of the country. Every dollar that we take from somebody, it's given to somebody else, has to be taken in the first place. And what we're doing is making sure that the whole patchwork of welfare systems works together. And so if you just look at one in isolation, you're only going to get part of the picture, and that's what some people want to do, but it's ignoring the whole picture, which is how we approach it.
What is your message then to these groups? Because there is almost universal support for a raise to the Newstart, including from significant groups to the Liberal Party like the Business Council of Australia. Why don't you think that they're seeing it from that perspective?
Well, they need to keep focusing only on Newstart. What I'm saying is that there's Newstart Plus for 99% of people who are on Newstart, and that's why looking at it in isolation doesn't reveal the full reality. If you look, of course, the challenge for them, and I understand the challenge, is they can't see the individual circumstances that it faces different people, because people are on different components of different rates, whether it be some form of family assistance as well as Newstart. And when you actually look at it on a case-by-case basis, that's the basis in which people live on, and that's why if you look in isolation, you're not getting the full picture.
When we look more broadly at the economy right now, we see Chris Richardson from Deloitte Access Economics discussing the RBA move. He believes it's been misinterpreted, the recent rate cuts, that he's probably more on the positive end of the debate, I think, than anything, and more in line with what the Treasurer is saying. Do you understand why people are a bit worried, though, when they see 2 rate cuts on the trot?
Well, I had some things to say before the rate cuts myself around raising concern of the impact it would have on those who live off interest-bearing deposits. And, of course, that's been borne out in part by the discussion around deeming rates. And so I can understand why people look at the Australian economy and they want to be confident the fundamentals are there. You just need to look at the statements of the Treasurer, now Philip Lowe, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, and, of course, respected economist Chris Richardson. What have we got? We know there's already a high amount of stimulation in the economy as a result of reducing taxes and moving towards removing tax brackets, which gives people confidence to invest in the future. We know that we have very high employment, in fact, record employment in Australian history, numerically. So there's plenty of reasons, so long as people have jobs, they're able to meet all their obligations, take care of their families, and make sure they're in the best position to get ahead for themselves. And, of course, we're also, as a nation, one of the few that's confronted some of the difficult challenges we have around things like pensions with a retiring and ageing population, where we have a high amount of capital there to invest. So the fundamentals are there, and that's the position that the government takes, and that's clearly what the Independent Reserve Bank Governor is taking, and now respected economists are taking. So that's the position in which I think most people should draw a pretty high degree of confidence.
One of the things highlighted in that report is the need to keep the foot on the accelerator, as they put it, in infrastructure, in particular to stimulate the economy. But could the government be doing more to invest in infrastructure in the regions and not just around capital cities and the congestion-busting programs that you've been spruiking?
Well, we shouldn't be building bridges to nowhere. We should be making prudent decisions around infrastructure that actually grow the economy. It's a critical part of the productivity discussion. And we do need to have a discussion around productivity, around structural reform. But yes, making sure we have the infrastructure that reduces costs and burdens on the economy, and we get better value for buck of the dollars we invest is also a critical part of it. But we need to also be realistic. We're very high infrastructure programs existing already in Melbourne and Sydney and other parts of the country. Part of our challenge is making sure we have the equipment and the labour supply to meet those challenges. And that's something that all levels of government, state and Commonwealth, are going to have to confront as part of the rollout. Not just, we don't need sugar hits, we need long-term sustainable growth and infrastructure investment to meet that growth.
Tim Wilson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.